It's my great pleasure to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, Dr. Paul Krajewski. Paul is the Director of Connected Vehicle Experience Research at the General Motors Global Research and Development Center. His laboratory is responsible for R&D in a variety of areas, including interior and safety systems, connectivity, user experience, cybersecurity, display, biosensing, and accessibility. Paul also represents GM as the U.S. Council of Automotive Research, U.S. CAR, and U.S. Drive Partnership, the Driving Research and Innovation for Vehicle Efficiency and Energy Sustainability, and also as the Technical Director for HRI Laboratory. He received his bachelor's and doctor's degree in material science and engineering from University of Michigan, Go Blue. Dr. Krajewski is also a member of National Academy of Engineering. Please join me, welcome Paul Krajewski.
No? No? Okay, awesome. All right. So I don't like standing behind podiums. I like to walk a bit, so you won't see me in that side of the picture at all. But first off, thank you very much, Henry, for the invitation to participate here. Truly excited to take the opportunity to kind of talk about what our vision is in automotive for connected driving and all that entails. And I also wanted to say, usually when there's a conference like this, I would love to spend all 2 days listening to all the talks, getting back and forth. We've got a bunch of visitors, so I'm kind of like dropping in and out, so I apologize for that. But you see my co-authors up there, and Su Ching is here as well from my lab. Reach out and connect afterwards. This is a super important topic, and we can't do this, any of us, by ourselves. You have to work together to enable this connected future, and it's really the public-private partnerships that are going to make this happen. So let's move on. So I want to talk a bit about the current state of connectivity, how we look at it, and then got a couple slides to kind of frame the different ways that we're thinking about this, from driver-informed to then where the vehicle is actually influenced by connectivity, and then a lot of the challenges to kind of get to that long-term future that we all want to see. All right? If you've ever seen a GM person talk, this is the vision. And the cool thing about connectivity is it touches all of these zeros, right? There's a huge safety component, there's a congestion component, and as we were talking earlier this morning with the Department of Energy, there's a fuel economy or range opportunity as well, if we could meet some of these goals. All right. Now, the whole concept of connectivity isn't exactly new. If you go back 10 years, we were probably having this discussion about where we're going to look from a connectivity perspective. In 2017, we launched this on our Cadillac CTS, and the problem was the vehicles were just driving around the road talking to themselves. We didn't have anybody to talk to at the moment. Just kind of getting up to speed with infrastructure. And so in many ways, I feel like we're rebooting this whole area right now. We kind of went through that Gardner hype cycle, and now I think between a lot of interest, you can see by the community here, and what we see in terms of funding opportunities, we're really kind of rebooting this going forward. So since that time, there's been a lot of connectivity that's enabled with our vehicle. And this is an eye chart, but it's meant to be an eye chart when you look at our vehicle and our smartphone, and at GM OnStar, we're connected to the cloud, to the back office, to your phone. All of these access points, we have wireless spots within our vehicle, so it's truly a connected system in the vehicle. And we're even exploring things like what could we do off-board, edge and cloud computing. That's a big challenge in the autonomous space. It's a lot of compute that you need to have on our vehicle. And if there's an opportunity to do some of that off-board, where latency is not an issue for a lot of calculations that you want to do, we think we can do that as well. So there's a lot of work there. But so the groundwork is now laid within the vehicle on being able to communicate. And now the question becomes, with that whole infrastructure, but now connecting the vehicle to the infrastructure, to other vehicles, and then to pedestrians, what does that look like, and how could we truly enable this connected future? All right, so I'm going to go through two charts that I like to kind of describe what our view of this connected future looks like. So to start, there's the old school of driver independence, where you could drive your vehicle, maybe you had a map sitting next to you. That's what I remember as a kid. But now we've moved in, we're well into the driver informed. So we have all of these information that can come into the vehicle and tell you something about what's going on. The next step is taking that to, now I get information and the vehicle could actually do something with that information, and you're not required to do it. So the intervening with the vehicle, and then the long-term vision, which that's a picture from 100 years ago at the World Fair, where GM had this vision of a fully autonomous, all-driving city. We're still a long way from that, but that's ultimately the goal that you'd love to get to. But now, how does connectivity feed into those four stages? Well, the first one is, where we are mostly today are these localized sensors. So we have sensors all over our vehicles to detect and understand what's going on. The next step is, what can you do with shared sensors? When what I sense provides information to someone else, so that we're all smarter. Two heads are better than one. And then the last one is when I have this ubiquitous sensor, when everything, vehicle, infrastructure, people are connected, and then you could truly make a difference from this connectivity landscape. So let's talk a bit about this first one, where I have information, I'm informing the driver, but I'm really relying on these localized sensors. So this is another eye chart, but it's there to make a point. Our vehicles have all kinds of sensors on them. And you could just look from steering, crash sensors, tire monitors. You can go up to the top, GPS navigation. So many electronic sensors to give me information outside the vehicle. And so what those have become are a whole suite of active safety features. So we've got, I could tell you if there's somebody in your blind zone. I could give you an alert if you're too close. If you leave the lane, I could have the seat buzz, and if the customer doesn't turn that off because it's annoying, you could get information there as well. So there's all these things, but again, these rely on a sensor on the vehicle and just giving you some information. But I think there's a huge opportunity, even with that information, to leverage a crowdsourced community to move along this connectivity path. So what is connected intelligence? This is taking all that information that I now have on the vehicle, crowdsourcing it, sharing it, and then providing that information back to the driver so they can make better decisions. And this is kind of like, Waze goes a little ways along that step, right? I could tell you there's a crash here, there's other things, and we're beginning to tell other people that data. I think there's an opportunity to do a lot more there. And so you could begin to look at things like, are there weather events? We've done some work with Department of Transportation's where I could take the information on a vehicle on when the automatic windshield wipers go on and crowdsource that information and get more accurate weather predictions of where there's rain and where there might be slippery conditions than the Weather Service can with that data. You could look at potholes, you could look at slipperiness, you could look at a whole bunch of other things that I could begin to pull all of that data together and now inform the driver and provide them some more information. And so this whole idea of crowd sensing and crowdsourcing, I think, is a huge area. We've got a lot of work going on at GM to try and explore what we can do with this information that we have on the vehicles and how we could provide better experiences for others based on the fact that we have this info. And this leads into something I'll talk about as well. Part of my lab, we're exploring information display, heads-up displays, augmented reality. What can I do with this information to provide a better experience for our customers? And you could think about this as Mario Kart in your vehicle, where I can now tell you where to drive, where there's a pothole, what's going on, where it's slippery, and really provide you more information than you have access to today. Again, only by leveraging the sensors on your vehicle, but then sharing that information within the network, and then potentially throwing some algorithms on there to calculate, all right? So that's kind of where we are today, and we're beginning to see some of this move forward. The interesting thing becomes, what can I do when I begin to share sensors? And right now, we have things that I could intervene on the vehicle, but it's not shared sensor. This is just a sensor on my vehicle telling me something. So we have adaptive cruise control, right? I could set how far, what speed I want to go at, how far in advance I want to keep as a space, and the vehicle will hold that space. So I've got sensors on a vehicle controlling the motion of the vehicle. Same thing with autonomous braking, right? We have systems on board right now that could sense a pending event and initiate the brakes on the vehicle. So this is now a step into taking the sensor information and adjusting the behavior of the vehicle. How do we take that to the next level and begin to interact with things beyond just the sensors on our vehicle and share that information? So one of the huge opportunities is in smart traffic lights. And this is some work that we've been doing for a long time with CAMP, MDOT, and others to look at what can we do to get information from the traffic lights. And in fact, there's some, MDOT has installed traffic lights a number of years ago outside the tech center in Warren, and you can drive down the road and get that input from the vehicle, to the vehicle from the stoplights that say, I'm going to turn red in 10 seconds. I'm going to turn green in 3 seconds. And so what that allows you to do is potentially adjust the path of the vehicle so that I don't have to stop at a stoplight, right? If I know that if I just increase or decrease my speed by 1 or 2 miles an hour because I know what's coming from the traffic signal, now I could keep traffic flow, and I could really begin to enable this decrease in congestion. And I think there's a lot of opportunities here. I just did a drive with some stuff that we've been exploring on the 12-mile road just outside the tech center, and it's pretty amazing when you begin to think about what kind of information you have and how it could impact how you're driving. Another example that was really exciting, we did some work with MDOT again on I-69 up near Lansing, and this was trying to leverage the data that we have from work zones. So the work zone will give off a signal, vests from workers will give off a signal, and then the work zone could get off a signal and let you know that there is a lane that's closed ahead. All right? So what we did was we tapped into that signal and linked that to our Super Cruise system on a vehicle. And so what you're going to see here is a movie where I'm driving on I-69 in the left lane, and we created the display up here, and it says, the lane is closed for construction. So it gets that signal. We need to take that signal and create that HMI to let the customer know what's going on. But in this case, I was just letting the customer know what was going on. The vehicle did all the work. So the vehicle said, I now know this is an issue. It's able to do a lane change all on its own, leveraging our lane change on demand with Super Cruise, and now I avoid the construction. So you imagine what that can begin to look like when I have that information from the infrastructure affecting the way the vehicle is driving. Construction is one example, but how many times are you frustrated driving down the road and these people that wait till the last minute to merge, and then suddenly I've got a whole traffic wave going behind me of congestion? If I could get that information early, I know the lane is ending, and sometimes these things are not necessarily somebody being with bad intent. You don't know which lane is ending because the sign is old and whatever else. If I could have that information, now I could hopefully improve traffic flow. So this is an opportunity where I'm taking information from the infrastructure and adjusting the way that the vehicle is performing. So this is one of those steps along a journey to a connected, autonomous future. And what you'd love to get to now is extended perception, right? So imagine I'm in this car on the bottom side. I could see what's going on until there's a car in front of me. And I'm driving someplace, in the UP, and there's someone driving 45 miles an hour, and I want to pass them, but I don't know if it's safe to pass. My view is limited by that vehicle ahead of me. So if I can't see what's going on and I make that change, I run the risk of an accident. However, two heads are better than one, having eyes in the back of your head, all of these things to get more data. If that vehicle ahead of me can tell me that there's a car over there, now I could be better informed about whether I could make a lane change or not. All right? And then ultimately, the vehicle could do that also. All right? And you could just think of so many examples of, can I inform people what's going on around me when I can't see it? And that's not just for humans, that's for ADAS systems as well, right? If I don't have line of sight with my LiDAR or something else, low visibility conditions, I'm in a city and there's an emergency vehicle coming down perpendicular to where I'm driving and I can't see. If I have this information and can send that signal, now I'm able to keep people safe and also improve on congestion. All right, so let's talk about this next one, where now I truly couldn't imagine vehicle control, right? We've done a little bit of that with some of these examples, but now I need sensors all over the place. What do we need in order to make that happen, all right? So there's a number of challenges that we see. And the first one is, it starts with a communication protocol. We have to make sure that there's a consistent protocol. When we were doing that original work was with the DSRC. Now the cellular V2X is essentially the dominant thought on what we're going to use here. But we need to make sure that we have the protocol in place, the accuracy and consistency of that data. And this will be one of the themes as we go through this. All of these things that I talk about are cool, but they're only cool if you can count on them working, right? And otherwise, if this city is different from that city is different from that city, now I've got inconsistency in my vehicle, and there's no way that's going to work. There's a lot of challenges around the sensors. I use this slide as I give a talk on the material challenges in autonomous vehicles, but we need to make sure that these sensors are low cost. If we truly want this ubiquitous connectivity, we need municipalities all around the country to be able to afford to invest, and you can't do that with super expensive sensors. We've got to drive that cost down. It's got to be robust. It has to work. There's just no way around it. If you're relying on that and that signal, that information, I've got to make sure that works. And that means even things like they have to be tolerant of bad weather, low visibility conditions, dirt, debris. Got to make sure that these things work. And then, we need to get a way that they are ubiquitous. All right. I like this one from a book that I was read to a lot as a kid, Sam and the Firefly. And the whole idea here was this crazy firefly went and created messages all in an intersection, go left, go right, and caused a huge traffic accident. And while it's funny in a kid's story, the idea here is if I'm relying on all this information, it's got to be accurate and reliable. Otherwise, I can't rely on it. All right? How do we interact with pedestrians? That's a huge opportunity. You look at the number of pedestrian accidents are more and more, and I'm reminded of this every time I come to a university. So we've got rules at GM that you are not allowed to walk through the halls like this, looking at your phone and bumping into people. But you come here and you just see students all the time, heads down, totally immersed. Now when you're crossing streets, that's not a safe situation, right? So how do we interact? The good news is because they're looking at their phones, maybe there's ways we could actually talk to them that way and they could see it. But it's something that we need to be aware of. One of the other areas that's in the lab that I lead is HMI and user experience. And this is something that we really need to understand as we begin moving with a lot of these features. So I took that chart that I showed earlier on moving from driver independence to vehicle control, and I added a y-axis there on the complacency risk. And so what I mean by that is, do I become dependent on the information that's sent to me from the infrastructure or whatever it is and change my behavior and in many ways become a less safe driver? And what does that mean? And that becomes super important whether you're talking about level 3 in autonomy or increasing levels of connectivity. So I've got teenage kids, watching them go through driver's training, having that light on the side mirror means they don't always look behind them. Having the camera that's in front of me means they don't always look behind them. If I am trusting that my vehicle automatically applies the brakes when there's an event in front of me, now I'm less aware. And in the cases that either that system isn't working or the information coming to me is not accurate, that opens up a lot of risk and could potentially lead to less safe conditions. So the whole user experience, how to communicate to people and how to kind of build that trust without the complacency is a huge opportunity. All right. And then how do we provide this information for the customer? I mentioned that we're doing work on augmented reality, heads-up displays. So we want to be able to provide this information that's useful. And I made the comment earlier that it's kind of like Mario Kart, but I don't want it to be as distracting as Mario Kart, right? I only want what is the relevant information that the person needs to make a decision while they're driving and provide them that information. And so there's a lot of work to study as we begin getting all of these signals to be able to communicate. Go back to the work zone example. What signal am I getting? What am I telling the person? Oh my gosh, why is this vehicle already changing lanes when I'm not expecting it? You need to be able to make that seamless. You have to have that trust and ability to communicate to the driver. And then this is an important one as well. So I mentioned we've been consumed the past couple days, and then back today with visits. We have the Department of Energy visiting GM, having a lot of discussions on things. And this question about public-private partnerships. As we reboot and really kind of accelerate this V2X journey again, what is the right role for everybody? And this is kind of an alphabet soup of, I'm part of US Car, there's Covesa, we've been part of CAMP for a long time. You've got energy, you've got the DOT, you've got the MDOT. How do all of them work together? And this becomes especially important with all the money that's on the street. And I talked to this with my team a lot, and had some discussions earlier with Henry as well. What we have to make sure of is that all these different research entities and DOTs aren't just hunting money. Oh, here's a grant. I could do this. I could do this. And pretty soon, you've got all of these disparate projects that are going on that will lead to a solution where things are connected, but not all integrated and connected, which doesn't help because of all of these other reasons. So we really need to think about strategically, what could we do? What's the role of automakers to push, of the academic community, the national labs, all of the DOTs? How can we kind of do this together to enable this vision of connectivity that we talked about? So with that, I want to make sure we respect the time here, but I'm also happy to answer questions as well. Thanks again, Henry, for the invitation. I really appreciate it. We're really excited about this connected future. I think it can keep people safer, it can reduce congestion, and it can reduce energy. We just need to have a really good strategy on how to go after it. So thanks again for the opportunity.